Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise. And we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear viewer, dear listener, welcome to yet another episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom. This is going to be a particularly thought-provoking and interesting episode. We're going to talk about all things having to do with identity and entrepreneurship. And my guest is Mr. Thabiso Cavin Bogopa, who is, you'll find out in a second why he's an ideally placed person to talk about this subject. Welcome to the studio, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do me a small favor and just explain your background and what you're about.
Okay. Like you've noted, my name is Thabiso Cavin Bogopa. I am an empowerment expert. Studied philosophy with the University of Botswana and continue to study with them even now. The hallmark of, or the culmination of what I do is that I am sort of a business doctor. I get into organizations and companies and I make a diagnosis of what their problems are, and then I give out prescriptions to assist them on that end. But I also do individual terms of individual clientele therapy that I also offer people. So, yeah.
Let me understand this in terms of training. Is it a master's in philosophy or a first degree?
Yeah, I'm actually pursuing a degree now. I think my master's is going to be in psychology. Yes.
Okay, and the first degree is on?
First degree is theology.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me also get to understand what you actually do in terms of companies.
Yes. What
is your setup?
Okay. I am a managing director in Edenite. It's a company called Edenite. We are a leadership company, leadership hub. We offer capacity buildings, we offer your team building, we offer your leadership development, and that is just basically what we look into.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We want to talk about identity, and the viewer will be curious, why identity? What is identity?
Yes. Identity is very critical to the development of any individual or organization. So identity, I would describe identity as, simply put, as who you are, as an understanding who you are, the basic fabric that forms the individual or that forms the organization that a person belongs to. Yeah.
And identity goes beyond what's on your umang, right?
Yes, it goes beyond what the institutions around you define you as, label you as per them. Because I think what is also critical to understand is that as an individual, you are also an institution by yourself. So you must be able to understand who you are so that you can be able to interrelate and interconnect with the other institutions that you find yourself in the geopolitical area that you belong to.
I've heard people in your space saying that one should always see themselves as a brand.
Yes.
Is that part of identity?
Yes. Brand is the expression of the identity, but you first must understand intricately and intimately who you are. Then you can go on to the branding, which is the expression of that identity.
I'm going to put you in your corner and ask you who Thabiso Cavin Bogopa is in terms of his identity.
In terms of my identity, I'm a healer, I'm a nurturer, I'm a thought provoker, I'm robust, I'm revolutionary. That is my identity. When you take out what I am and you are left with who I am, without all of this accolades, without the office, without the company, when we relate bare and naked, that is what I offer into the spaces that I am. Yes.
And how long did it take for you to discover this identity?
Identity, that's a very tricky one because it's a process. At every level of your existence, you get to discover a side to yourself that you previously were oblivious of. But I think my in theology, you call it my crescendo moment when I came into...
Your Christian?
My crescendo moment when I came into that, when I had that light bulb moment. I think for me, it's around 11 years ago. 11 years ago, I was still a student by then. I came across a little book called The Problem with Nigeria, written by Chinua Achebe. I think it's 28 pages. I was on detention and I was sent to the library to go and clean the library. And then I came across that book.
No, you had been a naughty boy.
Yes, I had been one.
Yeah, okay.
And I sat there and it gripped me. So I started asking myself, after reading that, questions about who I am, who I want to be, and how I want to manifest and impact onto the world. And
what is it about Chinua Achebe's book that really gripped you?
I think the opening, he says that there is nothing particularly wrong with the Nigerian populace, right? He says there's nothing particularly wrong. And as being a naughty boy, I was told that there was something wrong with me, and naughty is it's even a complicated term to use. I was very curious. I was very expressive. I stretched myself beyond what was normative of the human student limit by then. So I wasn't really naughty. So when he told me through that book that there's nothing particularly wrong with you, it's only that you haven't really gotten to unpack yourself, that it gripped me. Yes.
Let's go further and say, what is the importance of one's identity?
Yes.
Why is it important? I guess we're just going beyond philosophy and a little bit into psychology. Why is it important?
Okay. Of all the people that you are privileged to meet in your life, that you are going to make an acquaintance with, you are one of those people that you're going to meet yourself and interact with yourself. So if you're going to be a host to yourself and a dispenser of yourself, you must critically be aware of that, of who you are, so that you can apportion yourself to the world. Right? Now, that becomes very important in your relationships. It becomes important in the way you do business. It becomes important in the way that you interact with the world. So I find identity very critical in that sense.
And then in Botswana, speaking as an average Botswana, is there a group identity element, and if so, what is it? Okay,
I'm going to try not to. I'm tempted to be a little bit political, but I think I'll be being historical in the account that I'm going to give in answering that question. I wouldn't first start it at a group identity level. I'll start it here. You'd notice that in our history, Botswana was never colonized. It was declared a protectorate. Right. So even when we went to ask for the protectorate to be lifted, we are not asking for a lifting of the colonization, because we were never colonized to begin with. So what we missed in the struggle is that Botswana did not have a struggle of self-discovery and knowing themselves again outside the influence of the colonizer, because they were not necessarily colonized. I'm not negating the experiences of colonization on Botswana, but you'd realize that because of that, the after effect is that we did not have the struggle that nations that were colonized had. And the struggle was very important because it developed conversations around what identity is, who we are as a people. But Botswana missed that, and you can see the absence of that struggle in the way we do business, in our music, in our folklore, in our television, in everything. You can see that these people have not really grappled with identity. That's why the average Botswana, when they want to start a business, they copy what is already being done. They don't look within themselves to discover what is my individual and core fabric that I can express and manifest that into the world.
To what extent has that contributed to what some people term an entitlement mindset or entitlement mentality?
I haven't really thought about it in that angle. But the extent, who is entitled here? Who are we referring to?
An average Botswana.
An average
Botswana youth, for instance.
Okay.
There's a mentality that, well, you may not agree with it.
Yeah.
What is your position?
I don't think so. I think that is a poor reading of the reality on ground.
What is the proper reading? How are we? Is there a group think or a group brush that we can brush ourselves with?
No, I think for someone in my profession, I do not really delve in making blanket statements and painting everybody with the same brush. I try to look into, I try to make a multivariate analysis. And then
you recognize the individuality of the individual.
Of the individual. There's an argument to be made about entitlement. And if we look for it, we can find a certain level and extent of entitlement within the Botswana fabric. But also it ignores, when we make that single argument and we use it as the single causal or as the single blanket that covers everybody, we miss a very important reality of a young Botswana who's trying to make their stake, who's trying to push themselves to be something and to make something of themselves. And then we demoralize them by saying that they're entitled when they can't get that. Yeah.
For an entrepreneur, because our audience are entrepreneurs, how does identity impact on them and what they do? And I'm going to want you to use yourself as a case study to answer this question.
Identity for an entrepreneur, it gets laced and encrypted around the product or the service that you provide.
Yes.
Right. So we will be able to see a manifest of your identity in your service. We'll be able to see a manifest of your identity in the products that you are able to produce and to give out to people.
Yeah.
I give people, like I mentioned, I am a healer. So my services have that healing element, have the soothing and balming element that is able to touch onto people. Now, if you have not discovered your identity, or you are misrepresenting that identity, it will be able to manifest also in your services and in your products. So I think identity becomes very critical to the entrepreneur, because whether you are conscious or unconscious of it, it is laced and encrypted all around you and manifesting it at every point. Yeah.
And then in your case, what are those embalming, what are those services and products? You see, I want you to be shameless and open about yourself.
Okay. For example, for the past 3 years right now, I've been doing public lecture tours, touring the country and teaching and healing and equipping and improving people's quality of life. And that is laced and testifying to my identity as an educator, to my identity as a healer.
Free talks.
Mostly they've been free.
Yeah.
It's only last year that they became ticketed, and the ticket is around $70, right? So, and then we try to get a lot of sponsors to come in and get, so that it can be free. Also as a pastor, because I have pastored, I've pastored 3 churches. Also what I do as a therapist, offering therapy and offering healing and listening to people and showing that inherent within their problems is also their solutions, and listening to people and giving them a platform and all of that. So when you look at that and you try to unpack that, you realize the identity of the person who's trying to produce, who's offering a service. Yeah.
Now, is there ever a conflict between the person's identity as the years go over? In other words, is it something that evolves, or is it something that is stagnant?
Okay. Identity is malleable. It evolves. As you grow, you also realize yourselves in deeper measure, because as you grow, you increase your measure, you increase your capacity, and then you realize that the identity is elastic with you. It grows with you, and then you are able to fill in the spaces that you previously did not occupy. So it grows with you. But there is a struggle. There is a struggle with that, because who you were yesterday and who you are today will always be in contest, right? There will always be, the institutions around you will always try to negate, because they will fall in love and be intimate with one level and one fraction of you, not realizing that you're not a fraction.
You're multifaceted.
You're multifaceted, right? So that struggle is always there, but it's a very necessary struggle.
What are some of the dislocations and locations of identity that you see, perhaps in our country?
Yeah. Hey, the problem, let's start with the dislocations, right? I become troubled when I listen to our music. I become troubled when I look at young people trying to do cinematography. You realize that there isn't much of us which is identical to the Botswana fabric, you'd struggle to hear. You struggle to hear us because you see the Western influences that have crept into our chords, and you see Afro beats that are, when we call them African, you see the Nigerian music that has crept into our music, and it's very hard for you to really realize sinte. What is the music wa Botswana? What is our individual expression? So there's a dislocation there in terms of identity, because your music, your literature, your cinematography, how we do business, it all speaks to us. I'll give a typical example, and I like giving this example because let's say we meet in Heathrow, right? We are in Heathrow, we're stepping out of the airport, and then we're meeting each other. There's a Nigerian here, there's a South African, there's an American, there is someone from Britain there. If we all engage in a conversation, there's a Botswana there. We're most likely to tell that this is a Nigerian, most likely to tell this is an American, and most likely to tell that this guy is from London. But it's very hard for you to tell this guy is from Botswana, because we have never struggled with identity, so we have never held it dear. So even in our speech, and even in our accent, and we're not marketing it. So it's hard for you to be proud about the brand and your identity, because it's not dear to you.
To what extent has the influence of our numbers had on that? And in answering this, consider the fact that the Botswana in Botswana, 2.3 million, is a fraction of all the Botswana in Southern Africa. There are more Botswana in South Africa. There's, to some extent, quite a sizable number in Namibia, Botswana speaking.
Yes.
And of course, we have people in Zambia, the Lozis, who speak part of our dialect. To what extent has colonial borders restricted us in having a peculiar identity? For instance, can you imagine if there hadn't been 1885, the Berlin Conference, which created these artificial borders? Would the identity of a Botswana be not more akin to that of a South African, since there are so many Botswana there, and a Namibian, such that it blends a bit more? Southern Africa becomes one huge identity. I'm just asking you to think beyond.
I think I would think it, let's say, for instance, if 1888 didn't happen.
1885, I can't remember the year,
No, I'm not talking about the Berlin, I'm talking about the arrival of Van Riebeck and...
1642, Van Riebeck originally came in 1652.
The Great Trek, when it moved into our region, I'm not sure.
It was in 1700, 1800s,
in the 1800s. Let's say the 1800s didn't happen. I would like to look at our number not as a disadvantage, but as an advantage. It's easier for you to curate smaller numbers. It's easier for us to look within ourselves when we are fewer. So I think the burden that we have as a people and as a nation is that we need to look at ourselves and see how we can use little to achieve more. So I'm trying to, I think is also a bias from my expertise, because I'm always trying to find advantages and disadvantages.
Let's narrow it down to an entrepreneur now. You're a business person, you're struggling in this market. How do you then A, find your identity, and B, how does the role of identity help you to serve your network?
Number one, I personally do not believe that identity is revealed. I believe identity is discovered. And I use discovered very aware of the practical implications associated with the use of the word. They must be pursued. You must search it out. You must look for it. You must look for it all around you. And this is my philosophical persuasion. I believe that life is hinted. You must, if you are going to discover your identity, you must take a hint, and life will always hint to you. It hinted to you that you are an advocate. It hinted to you that you are able to represent other people and be a voice for the voiceless and seek out justice. Now, how you got to the point that you are an advocate and how you got to the point where you are assisting people's lives as an entrepreneur was all hinted, but you need to be able to take a hint. So identity is not going to be revealed by Mr. Mogobe telling you that this is who you are, but you're going to have to look all around you to discover the pointers, the markers to you. Now, how does identity assist in, the last question was, how does identity assist in?
In us being able to serve our network as entrepreneurs.
Yes. When you come into the full knowledge of who you are, you can be able to dispense with full thrust who you are. And we can be able to experience you in your full measure. The truth is that because we have only glimpses of who we are experiencing perhaps 5% of who you are. Really? The 95 is lost. I'm giving an example. It's possible for you to live your life at a 5% percentage when you are, and we are not preview to the 95, so we don't enjoy you. So now if you come to the full understanding of who you are, then you can be able to serve your market and your network better.
So how do you unpeel the onion? For instance, imagine I'm your customer, I really want you to help me. How do you unpeel the onion? And in answering this, you can also address the question of how identity intersects with brand or branding. We may have touched on it earlier, but it's how do you do it as a profession? How do you help the viewer to get to the heart of it?
We'll start here. Everything you come to tell me as the problem is always encrypted with a solution. That's the first thing. That's my first position. So I'll be able to pick from your description of the problem, your representations of the world, the representations of where you are, and then I'll try to locate your social location, where you are located, and then given the context of also your geopolitical area, I can be able to understand that and then narrow it down. But I think in simple terms, what we would do is that let's first look at what you are not, right? And then we deal away with what you're not. After we have dealt away with what you are not, what do we have left? And then we start working with those things. That's how we start unpeeling the onion that you are talking about. And then how does identity intersect with branding? Branding, like I said, is how you manifest yourself to the world. It's how you want to curate the image and the perception of you to the world, how you want the world to be able to receive you and relate with you. Now, identity, without having an understanding of who you are not in control of how the world then sees you, because you will manifest any which way, right? But when you have your identity, you know, my brand isn't that. So I'm not going to talk like that. I'm not going to, this subject, although it's a trending subject on social media right now, my expertise and my brand does not allow me to have an expert opinion on this because I'm a student on this. So with identity, you can be able to curate the brand and make sure that you manifest and impact on the world that you are.
And how does your company actually help the individual? What processes or systems do you have in place?
We're really transforming right now, moving away from a lot of walk-ins. So we're trying to work with organizations and trying to work with companies to come into their own companies and come into their organizations and assist their employees and perhaps even their clientele on identifying who they are and developing themselves as leaders first to themselves and then to the world. So yeah, that's just basically how.
Is there any traction? In other words, is there any track record there?
In terms of the work that we do?
Yes, what you were just describing.
Yes, there is a track record. We're going into, because we're going also into the research area, because after we deal with you, we try to document all of those things so that we can show where we are. We are concerned by the happiness index. Our rating out of 147 countries, I think we are 143 of the most unhappiest people. So it's a concern to us. We're trying to be systematic and try to be empirical with that.
Are you finding that on the street it's like that? Are people really that unhappy? Or is it just something that some academician has come up with?
There is a truth to it.
I tend to be generally skeptical. I don't know. Are we that unhappy?
Yeah, I think we are. But I wouldn't say to that extent. But we are unhappy nevertheless. We are unhappy. And you'd realize that the more, from a psychoanalyst perspective, the people become generally angrier when they have issues that they feel they cannot do anything about, when they feel helpless. When they feel helpless. So usually, typically how it will manifest, someone will become moody or someone will become easily irritable. And you'd notice that about Botswana. Because
sometimes.
Yeah, there is a conversation that I think Botswana need to have that we are not having. There are certain things that we are unhappy about and we feel like, okay, it's going to be like that. I don't know what those things are. I cannot say them here, but we definitely need to deal away with that.
Well, are we not maybe unhappy about the COVID situation?
Everybody's unhappy with the COVID situation. If you're going to use that as a marker, then the happiness index will be disqualified.
Yeah.
So it looks at a lot of things.
And still on COVID, how do you think it has impacted our identity and our branding and all the sort of things you deal with?
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, for my business, I think COVID has been a positive thing more than it has been a negative thing. Let's take away that loss of life. That's painful, we understand that, but we're trying to have a high-level philosophical abstractions and then put them down, right? So it has been positive. Why? And I'll give you maybe two things. Number one, through COVID, we were able to sit down with ourselves. We sat down with ourselves. We have had the most issues during COVID becoming unpacked because we have been having conversations that we as a people have not been having for the longest time. And Botswana has been a conflicted contradiction. Right now, we are able to unpack that, and we are having conversations. You are seeing it on social media. You are seeing the level of debate, the level of conversation, even in our as our policymakers engage. So I think COVID brought that to life, and because we became scared and we were looking all over the place, we're able to see who we are. We're able to see who we are not. We're able to see where we want to be. So I think that was pretty positive.
Has there been a specific COVID dividend for you personally or for your company?
COVID has increased my net worth a little bit.
Okay.
Because the people have been dealing with a lot. Companies have been dealing with a lot, unaware. Now, when COVID came, they started calling on us to come and then diagnose, to come and look at where they are. So it has improved my quality of life, and I believe we're never going back to where we were. In fact, after COVID, we are moving further. So I believe, yeah.
All right, let's proceed to the next point, which is can identity be managed, and should it be managed, and why?
Yes, identity should be managed like everything. Anything that is going to be significant in your life must be managed. It must be taken care of. It must be measured. You must measure who you are and apply yourself accordingly, with a little bit of stretching yourself here and there, taking risk, but it must be managed, because anything that will not be managed will be misused or it will be inappropriately placed.
So how does one measure identity?
You look at the representations of you. Who am I? Right. That's the question that you ask. And then you put those things down. And then from those things, those variables, then you develop a constant out of those variables. And then from that, you measure yourself. What is my capacity? What is my measure as an individual? And you are able to have a semblance of a measure. It's not something that is really, I wouldn't give you a numeric, but it's something that you can be able to estimate, to say, okay, this is who I am. I think I can be able to apply for this position. I can be able to open this sort of business or run this sort of organization based on who I am. So it must be measured. Yeah.
Okay, does that imply that growth is factored in, that as you measure, you come back and remeasure as you grow?
Yes.
And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, as you grow, let's try to take it down. As I grow older, not big, I don't want to go bigger, but bigger. This clothes no longer fit. Yeah. Right. So I must go back to the tailor, remeasure, go to the shop and get a different size. So the same thing with identity. You grow, and then you must keep on remeasuring. And sometimes you realize that you grow, but then you change in size, you reshape. That is what a lot of things maybe.
Well, from going to the gym, maybe.
Yeah. I digress a bit, but that's some of the things that our entrepreneurs and our businesses are lacking, an ability to readjust and find a new normal. Right. Yeah. So that is what identity does. Yeah.
And this is where you come in. You assist them in that regard.
Assist you to adjust and find a new normal.
Okay.
It looks simple, but it's a very complicated thing. Adjusting and finding yourself in a different location, it can be very. So that's why you need a coach. You need somebody to coach you through that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Using specific examples, perhaps even from your life, can you give an indication of what the dangers are of not properly representing your own identity, or not really creating your own identity?
Yes.
Yes.
If you don't become proactively participant in the development of your own identity and in its manifestation, you're going to have, number one, people telling you who you are. You're going to base your identity on externals, which then becomes, your identity becomes unsustainable because it is told by other people. If we want to go a little bit political, one of the problems that we have as a continent, and probably also as a nation because we are part of the continent, is that we have our identity and who we are. We are being told who we are from Yale, from Oxford, and from Harvard. And
are you alluding to this system of bringing external experts to come and analyze and give reports? And give reports,
because here's the thing, everybody that analyzes through a schema. They have a conceptual representation of the world that it always influences and impacts on their analysis of the world. Now, if you're going to bring someone from Harvard, from America, a resident of the American nation, to come here, that schema, to what extent can you measure how that schema impacts on this person's analysis of the Botswana demographic? So I think also in saying that, maybe I should be very bold and emphatic in saying that we need to develop our own analysts and trust our own analysts because they understand, and their schema is a Botswana bred schema.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And how do you really put that message across to government?
Yeah.
How do you get the policymakers to understand what you're saying?
I'm in the process. I'll say I'm in the process because I haven't punched through that yet. I have worked with Ministry of Youth, I've worked with Ministry of Finance, but not to the high level that I wish I could be able to work with them and work with the government. But I think we do it, and then the government will be able to see that. I think some of the things that I keep getting as I go to speak in corporations and in companies, they're like, oh, Botswana. Like, they don't believe, they don't think that the Botswana can engage in that level of conversation or in that thought process. So we need to keep having those conversations, conversations like we're having right now, until they're able to hear that.
Where does that come from? Why do we have that self-doubt? It's almost like disbelief that Botswana can achieve anything significant. I've had a fair amount of that.
Yeah.
Where does that come from, and how can it be addressed?
Without sounding too political, but life is political itself, is that the textbooks that we read at school, our education system and how we have been taught, everything has been represented by another. So we were othered in our education, and we other ourselves. So we feel like the representation, which is white, which is foreign, which is alien, is the one that is able to do it. And because we did not see ourselves in our education system, we did not see ourselves in the stories of success that are being used as examples, even as people motivate us in our schools and motivate us in life, we never really get to see ourselves as capable. So I think in order to deal away with that, we have to change, we have to have an education overhaul, and then we try to feature the Botswana narrative, the Botswana person, the Botswana story in the stories that we use to curate.
Okay, so have we started to, actually you're talking about decolonizing, decolonizing the African classroom, and it's something that we've spoken about in the Nuggets. I have an interview of a certain Dave Mulusi who talks directly about this. He's written a book about it. But I want your take on this. How successful are we, and are we aggressive enough as entrepreneurs, as business people, in saying enough is enough, we need a new curriculum, we need to decolonize our classrooms?
Okay, I'll say this, and I'm very aware that this is a very bold statement, but I've taken years to think about this, and I've thought about it very thoroughly. The problem with that is that I believe that we are fairly aggressive in decolonization. In systematic theology, we say there's a process called the process of deconstruction. I think we are only at the process of deconstruction where we are tearing things down and have no replacements for those things. And life has no respect for vacuum. So there are no vacuums. So we tear down, we tear down, we tear down, and we have a lot of people that are very vocal, that have the linguist of tearing down, but we don't have anything in place to build. After we have begun the process of deconstruction, there must be a process of reconstruction. That is the conversation that we are supposed to be having right now. The conversation of then, after we have teared down, after we have destroyed these representations, this Western and colonial and imperialistic representations, how can we have African and Botswana-centric representations, and then we begin the process of reconstructing that narrative by building those characters, developing those stories, developing the folklore and the myths and the legend that speak to us. Right. So I think that's where we are.
In that effort, is there any room for reviving our languages?
There is, and I think every one of us, every single one of us must be proactively participant in that process, from entrepreneur to the pastor, to our courtrooms, to our businesses. All of this, we must esteem ourselves.
Have you noticed how during the time of Seretse and partly the time of Masire, all the public signs were both English and Setswana? All of a sudden, it's mainly predominantly English. What is
I
the
wouldn't
cause
say
of
I
that?
noticed that. I wasn't alive.
You're not around during Seretse's time.
I was not around during Seretse's
But you were around during the time of QKJ Masire.
Yes, I was a toddler.
Yeah.
By then, I was alive.
Have you seen that the signs are almost always in English?
I've seen that they are always in English, but then I didn't have a relative. I didn't have a relative picture of how they used to be.
They used to be both.
They used to be both.
Okay. I wonder whether that is a small step that maybe you can speak to say, look, let's just change there. You go to China, you go to Hong Kong, everything is English, Chinese, Chinese, English, Chinese, English. Why in Botswana has this Botswana disappeared?
Yeah, and what I would say to that, I wouldn't just speak to the signboard. I would speak to language. Language is very important because language carries the people, right? So when you want to completely control an individual, you start by changing their language, or you start by curating the language that you use towards them. As you read this language, as you see this language, as you speak this language, as you become fluent in this language, you become fluent in the culture of the language, you become fluent in the identity of the language. That is why you have Botswana that are so eclipsed and completely oblivious to the reality of what a Motswana is, that they have taken up and embodied a foreign and alien identity, that there is no Motswana left in them. And that is owed to language. You are beaten at school right now for speaking English.
And your own kids talk back in English.
And they talk back in English. And and I understand the political debate around that. There is a place for English as a universal language, but there must be a very huge place that we apportion to our own language and celebrating it, and how Setswana can be used as a unifying factor in terms of unifying our efforts, unifying our thought process in pushing us forward.
And I was speaking to another guest about how the culture is embodied in our systems, and I spoke of the system of the Kotla, and I spoke of the system of Botu or Ubuntu.
Ubuntu, yes.
That system is richer when used in the vernacular, more than in terms of the idioms, and in terms of the systems of what is your take on that?
I'm actually studying a course with the university studying as an ethicist, where it deals with moral theories. And I was writing a paper, and I had a struggle writing on Botu. So when you are searching for papers, when you're doing a research for your referencing, you can only find papers in Ubuntu, not Botu. But it's the same concept, but it means Botswana are not writing in our language. They're not terming it in our language. We're not owning it. Right? And that is problematic, sir. We must be able to this universal or humanistic conversation, draw it down to our level. I digressed a bit, but yes.
And I'm sure that you have a paper on Botu now that you've created or you're working on.
I'm working on it. I believe that in 2 months, the paper will be on academic edu.
Now, how does one get to identify their truest, quote-unquote, identity in your view? How do you really get to, well, this is me now, this is true? How do you go about doing that?
Okay. There is an expression of yourself that you would, like I said, as you are not just you are also a custodian of you. That's there's a dualism to that. I think the abstraction often is that we think that we are just us. But I'm not just Thabiso Bogopa. I'm also an individual licensed to carry the persona of Thabiso Bogopa as I manifest him. Now, as I
and also to represent it out there.
And to represent it out there. As I manifest him, there is a manifest of him that I sync so well with, that I realize and that I feel as I realize him, that this is his truest fabric. This is his algorithm. This is where he vibrates in his highest frequency. And then that's where you have, this is me. I'm an advocate. This is me. I am a healer. This is me. I am this. So I think it's something you know when you know.
But you do have systems of helping the person. I spoke of unpeeling the unpeeling the onion. We do have those systems.
Yes, we look at, for example, your perceptual representations are very important. We start with those, right? How you perceive yourself and how you perceive others, and then from there, it's in between. The work of a philosopher and a psychologist is not. It's in between. It's in between the lines.
You mentioned at the beginning that you diagnose businesses and companies, and I don't know whether you actually prescribe a cure. Yeah. But I want you to shift this little bit to businesses. Yeah. And tell me how you deal with the identities of businesses, and what prescriptions you give. As a business doctor, the way you describe yourself, how do you go about prescribing a cure? Go through the process, maybe even give specific examples to help us understand.
Okay. I'm not even sure if I should be able to give this example.
Without mentioning names, of course.
Without mentioning names, okay. I was recently dealing with an organization that was, it was government owned, right? And then it was shifted and privatized, right? Now, as I get into the organizations, they're given a 10-year period to be able, while they're still sponsored. They're privatized, but they're still sponsored, right, by government. Now,
during those 10 years, they have to find their own income streams to become independent.
To become independent. But when you look into this organization, you come in, you realize there is a clash of identity. There are people that came with this organization from government and then were pushed into the private sector. So they have a government mentality.
Bureaucratic,
formalistic, this is us. No space for ingenuity, no space for fluidity and flexibility. Now, you have these two identities that are in contrast. Now, you wouldn't realize that, you just experience clashes. And you would notice that the people that are, as you clash, you notice that there's them and then there's us. Now, as I come in as a business doctor, I come in, then I sit down with you, and then I listen. And I listen, and I can pick who is who belongs to a parastatal, who belongs to a private, right? And then we're able to, okay, after having done that, what do we need to do? We need to do away with the old systems and develop together in a system of co-creation. How do we shift these people to come together and be able to work together towards this goal? There must be a deculturing process that we get into. We deculture, we deprogram, and then we inculture anew by developing a system that everybody becomes participant in the make of that system. And then you realize the transformation becomes holistic. And before you know it, the culture in the workplace has shifted. The identity of the people has shifted, because as you shift an organization, you shift even the people that belong to that organization. There are shifts in their own personal lives, shifts in their marriages, shifts in their psychology, and then the energies, it becomes vibrant and all of those things, and then there's transformation that takes place.
And the process involves what? A series of seminars, symposium, workshops?
There are multiple ways that you do it, but with this particular one that I gave, I started sitting down, I started having a meeting with EMT, the executive management teams. I wanted to hear from them and then push them outside, get what I collected, analyze that, have a meeting with just choose people randomly and then go into departments systematically and then sit down with those things and then, ask a bunch of questions to get into the psyche.
The Socratic method.
Yes, get into the psyche of the individuals and get into the heart of the organization. Review their mission. How many people know the mission of Mogobe Incorporated? How many people know how many people have embodied that? How many people are walking with you and how many people are moving with you? Because to walk with you and to move with you are two different things. Yeah. Right. So it can easily be, so we ask a bunch of questions and then
how long does it take to achieve that ideal transformative state that we're looking for?
It took me 6 months with this one.
It was enough in 6 months?
It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. But I did my fair bit. I did my fair bit.
Why was it not enough?
You know, finances and all of those things, because it takes a lot of work. You have to travel, you know, go through other offices. You know, there's a lot that is incorporated in that. So we could have been doing much more. But
so you're not happy with the results?
I'm happy with my report. It was honest.
Yeah.
It was honest.
But
it
the
was
change
fair.
that occurred.
There was, and I'm happy that there is a change that I can testify to, and I'm happy that there is a shift in terms of culture, and in terms of the thought process of management.
Without diagnosing a particular company, what typically are the signs and symptoms of a company that needs your intervention in terms of dealing with identity issues?
Okay.
When you say this company requires intervention, you'll see what? What are the things you'll see?
I think probably we have to start here. There is an ideology that goes around in the business fora that the customer is always right. I don't buy that.
Completely.
I don't buy that. Not completely, but I don't buy that, because nothing is absolute. You're really pushing me to be, to be philosophical. I don't buy that. You know, I think the right way is that there's a prioritization of the customer beyond and above the employee. Get your employees right, you don't have to worry about your customers, because the employees will sustain the customers, because they are the front line. So if the customer is frustrated, I mean, if the employees are frustrated, the sales will be down, the culture will be terrible, delivery will be terrible. Immediately when that happens, you should call Thabiso Bogopa.
Interesting.
You need a doctor.
Interesting, yeah. Final words, entrepreneurship, identity, crystallize your thoughts. How do you wrap it all up, put it all together?
Yeah. I think identity is very critical to life. It affects how we manifest ourselves. It affects how we interact with the world. And we would realize that the world is a system of interrelatedness and interconnectedness, so much that our lack of, or the presence of identity impacts in the system of interrelatedness. So if we get it right, it's going to affect in all our levels of existence. If you get it wrong, it's going to affect in all your levels of existence. So identity becomes very critical in that sense.
Amen. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
Here's your chance to hit me with a question, sir.
Okay. All right. What is if you were given an opportunity to sell, to brand, to speak to the identity of Botswana, maybe at the World Economic Forum, as I believe you would go there, the highest stage, it could be there. How would you describe us?
Botswana the country or Botswana the people?
Let's do both. Let's do both to do it justice.
I haven't given it a lot of thought, but I'll just hazard a guess that we are noble people. We are noble people. We are very proud people. Proud in the positive sense of the word. And we have a very rich culture and rich history. If you look at the feats achieved by the likes of Sechele, if you look at the feats achieved by the likes of Batwing and Kama, we have such a rich history. And I like what Seretse said, that a nation without culture is a nation that is lost. So I piggyback on what you said, in the sense that if we can somehow grab this culture, grab this identity and bottle it, and put it somewhere that it can be accessed, be available to our people, and then use it to re-energize ourselves, we can certainly do that. So I think our identity goes far beyond our diamonds. We've allowed our diamonds to dominate in terms of our thinking, at least at a government level. The idea that, middle level country, it goes beyond that. I suspect, and somebody might criticize me for this,
Yeah.
we'd have achieved a lot more
Yeah.
if we had not discovered diamonds.
Yeah.
I suspect we'd have been more ingenious.
Yeah.
I think we'd have been more hungry.
Yeah.
I suspect, and this can raise a lot of criticism,
Yeah.
that as a country, if everything was not given on a silver, silver spoon or on a plate,
Yeah.
we would have gone a lot further. So
because we didn't make diamonds.
yes,
We discovered them.
we discovered
so there was
them.
no struggle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, why do I say this? I mean, a lot of countries we're benchmarking against, such as Singapore, don't have anything.
Yeah.
There's no oil in Singapore.
Yeah.
But look how far they are ahead of us.
Yeah.
One that is comparable to us, that was comparable to us, a country at independence, which is UAE, I mean, United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
They discovered oil. Look at how far they are. So you realize that it's never about resources.
Yeah.
It's about resourcefulness.
Yeah.
So that same resourcefulness that we've had, if we had adopted some of the learnings from the Western culture and applied that original resourcefulness, that attitude of those idioms that our parents taught us, if we can live by those, then you see that this is the real identity of the Botswana. The culture is just rich. We're a noble and we're a proud people who are very, very industrious and very, very capable. How we can word that in the sense that you do, you as an expert, I don't know. But that's what I think of when I think of Botswana.
I got the gist. I love your appreciation of us. I love appreciation of us. I think we need to give more positive feedback about who we are and identify ourselves in positive lenses.
Yes.
So I love that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You see that camera there?
Yeah.
This is a chance to talk to that entrepreneur and try and motivate them, that youngster, whoever it is, give them something positive on the subject of identity, a takeaway, so to speak.
Okay. I would just say that success is not a spontaneous combustion. You must literally set yourself on fire. And the proof of desire will always be pursuit. You must desire to find out who you are, intersect that in your business, lace and encrypt that in how you manifest yourself to the world, and then you'll be able to gain your own individually described success.
Wonderful, wonderful. Would you care to tell the audience how they can reach you, your contact details, social media, emails, all the rest of it?
All right. Thabiso Cavin Bogopa is my name on Facebook, Thabiso Cavin on Twitter, Thabiso Cavin on Instagram. Our business lines are 77916536, 71855792. Our email, personal email, Thabiso Cavin Bogopa @gmail.com, and we'll talk from there, and then you can access our business from there.
Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for coming.
It's been a great pleasure.